In the 1970s, Sanskrit scholar Dr. K. S. Arjunwadkar made a startling discovery while comparing ancient manuscripts of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. What he found would challenge everything scholars thought they knew about this foundational text of yoga. Across different manuscript traditions, from Kashmir to Tamil Nadu, he found variations that couldn't be explained by simple copying errors. Entire sutras appeared in some versions and were absent in others. More disturbing still, certain commentaries referenced techniques that no longer appeared in any available version of the text. This is the documented story of what really happened to Patanjali's original teachings, why certain practices were kept secret for over 2,000 years, and what modern researchers are discovering about the most powerful techniques in human consciousness, the real mystery of Patanjali. Here's what historians actually know. Patanjali remains one of history's most enigmatic figures. We don't even know if he was one person or several. The name appears on 3 different works: the Yoga Sutras, a medical treatise, and a Sanskrit grammar text, spanning possibly 500 years. The Yoga Sutras themselves are impossibly condensed, 196 sutras containing the entire science of consciousness in just 1,158 Sanskrit words. But here's the first real mystery. Early commentators like Vyasa, 7th century, reference concepts that don't appear in our current versions. Even more intriguing, the oldest known commentary, the Yoga Bhashya, treats certain sutras as if everyone already knows advanced practices that are never actually explained in the text. It's like having an advanced physics textbook that assumes you already know calculus, but the calculus textbook is missing. What scholars actually found. The real story begins with the Mysore Palace manuscripts. In 1930, Sanskrit scholars gained access to the Palace Library and found something extraordinary: multiple versions of the Yoga Sutras with significant differences. The Kashmir manuscript tradition had 195 sutras. The Bengal tradition had 194. The South Indian tradition had 196. But most shocking, references to a complete version with over 250 sutras. Dr. M. D. Paradkar's 1938 critical edition documented these variations, but his work was largely ignored. Why? Because it suggested something uncomfortable. The Yoga Sutras we study today might be an edited, simplified version of something much more comprehensive. The oral tradition secret. Here's where it gets really interesting. Documented interviews with traditional yoga lineages reveal a consistent pattern. Masters like Sri T. Krishnamacharya, the father of modern yoga, claimed his family possessed oral teachings that accompanied the written sutras, practices too powerful to write down. Krishnamacharya's son, T.K.V. Desikachar, revealed in a 1980 interview, "My father taught certain breathing ratios and meditation techniques only to specific students. He said these came from an oral commentary tradition that was never written, because in the wrong hands they could cause psychological damage." This isn't conspiracy, it's documented fact. The question is, what were these practices? The 3 categories of hidden knowledge. According to oral traditions and commentary texts, 3 categories of advanced practice were deliberately kept out of written form. These weren't necessarily removed sutras, but rather techniques considered too powerful for public dissemination. First, the practices of immediate awakening. While Patanjali mentions pratibha, spontaneous intuitive insight, in Sutra 3.33, the oral traditions describe specific techniques for triggering these states. The Yoga Vasista and Kashmir Shaivism texts reference methods for instant recognition that were considered too destabilizing for unprepared minds. One documented technique from the Siddha tradition involves a specific breath ratio combined with focused awareness at the crown. When the breath is held for 16 counts while maintaining awareness at the Brahmarendra, practitioners report sudden shifts in consciousness. Modern Neuroscience from Stanford University, 2019, shows this specific combination can trigger massive DMT release from the pineal gland, the same compound responsible for near-death experiences and mystical states. The ancients knew what we're just discovering. Second, The conscious death practices. The concept of ichamrityu, death at will, appears throughout yogic literature, but the actual techniques were closely guarded. The Kathopanishad hints at this knowledge, stating, "When all the knots of the heart are loosened, then the mortal becomes immortal." Documented cases exist. In 1837, Yogi Haridas was buried alive for 40 days in Lahore under British supervision. The event was witnessed by the British officer Sir Claude Wade and recorded in official documents. When exhumed, Haridas was revived using specific techniques. The oral tradition preserved practices involving systematic withdrawal of prana from the extremities to the central channel. The Tibetan Buddhist Phawa practices share remarkable similarities, suggesting a common Indo-Tibetan source of this knowledge. Government-funded research at AIIMS Delhi in 2020 documented yogis demonstrating voluntary suspended animation, reducing heart rate to nearly undetectable levels while maintaining consciousness. The techniques match descriptions from oral traditions. Third, the reality manipulation concepts. While the Vibhuti-pada mentions siddhis, oral traditions spoke of even more profound abilities. The concept of bhuta siddhi, mastery over elements, was considered achievable through specific practices never written down. The technique involved what's called bhuta shuddhi combined with dharana on specific elements. Ancient texts describe yogis who could allegedly generate internal heat in freezing conditions, documented in Tibetan Tummo practices. Remain without food or water for extended periods, studied in the case of Prahlad Jani. Demonstrate immunity to poison, referenced in the Yoga Ratnakara. The most documented example comes from Swami Rama's demonstrations at the Menninger Clinic in 1970. Under strict laboratory conditions, he showed voluntary control over his heartbeat, creating different rhythms in different parts of his heart, the ability to alter his brain waves at will, temperature control creating an 11-degree difference between different parts of his palm. These weren't supernatural powers. They were latent human capacities activated through specific techniques preserved in oral traditions. Why were they hidden? The real reason for secrecy wasn't mystical, it was practical. Historical records from traditional ashrams document cases of students experiencing Kundalini syndrome, now documented in psychiatric literature, practitioners developing savikalpa samadhi but being unable to function normally, cases of temporary psychosis from incorrect practice. A 1926 letter from Swami Kuvalayananda to Mahatma Gandhi, preserved in the Kaivalyadhamma archives, states, "Certain yogic practices produce profound alterations in consciousness. Without proper preparation and guidance, practitioners risk psychological fragmentation." This isn't ancient superstition. Modern neuroscience confirms that intensive meditation can trigger everything from temporal lobe epilepsy to depersonalization disorder in unprepared individuals. The scientific validation. Here's where it gets mind-blowing. Modern research is validating why these practices were kept secret. University of Wisconsin, 2018. Brain scans of advanced meditators showed they could voluntarily activate brain regions considered outside conscious control, including the ability to regulate pain perception and body temperature. Harvard Medical School, 2017, documented that specific breathing techniques can alter gene expression, potentially explaining the immortality practices mentioned in texts. IIT Delhi, 2021. Measured electromagnetic fields around advanced practitioners during deep states, finding anomalous readings that correlated with subjective experiences of expansion. These studies suggest the hidden practices work by accessing normally dormant neural pathways and genetic potentials. The Manuscript Evidence. Let me share the most compelling evidence. In 2001, the Saraswati Mahal Library in Thanjavur digitized palm leaf manuscripts dating to the 11th century. Among them, researchers found commentary referencing withheld sutras, Gouda Sutrani, mentions of a teachers-only version, Acharya Matra, specific warnings about practices that could break the vessel of the body. Dr. P. V. Karambelkar's analysis found that at least 40 to 50 sutras mentioned in ancient commentaries don't appear in any current version. These weren't lost. The commentaries explicitly state they were reserved for direct transmission. The classified research. In the 1980s, the Indian government briefly funded research into yogic phenomena. The project, headed by Dr. H. S. Sharma at the Defense Institute of Physiology, studied advanced practitioners claiming extraordinary abilities. While full results were never published, leaked documents mention yogis demonstrating conscious control over typically autonomic functions, unexplained temperature regulations in extreme conditions, cases of suspended animation lasting days. The project was abruptly terminated in 1987. When questioned in Parliament, the defense minister stated the research was redirected to more conventional areas. The original data remains classified. Modern rediscovery. Today, something remarkable is happening. Ancient practices are being validated by science, and carefully preserved oral traditions are slowly being documented. The Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram has begun recording oral teachings. Bihar School of Yoga published previously secret techniques in limited editions. Neuroscience labs are mapping the states described in hidden commentaries. But here's the crucial point. These teachings are emerging because we now have the scientific framework to understand them safely. EEG machines can monitor brain states. MRI scans can track neurological changes. We can finally study these practices without the risks ancient masters feared. The ultimate truth. Here's the deepest secret hidden in plain sight. The Yoga Sutras were never meant to be complete. Patanjali himself states in Sutra 1.1, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Now, the discipline of yoga continues. The word Anushasanam doesn't mean begins, it means continues in disciplic succession. The sutras were always meant to be a framework, with crucial details transmitted teacher to student. The real lost sutras were never lost. They were preserved in the living tradition, passed from realized master to prepared student across generations. They weren't hidden out of elitism, but out of compassion, the same way we don't give children power tools. One recovered fragment from the oral tradition states, the highest teaching cannot be spoken, written, or thought. It can only be transmitted from the silence of one who knows to the silence of one who is ready to know. So where does this leave modern seekers? With more access to authentic practices than ever before, but also with the responsibility to approach them wisely. The recovered knowledge teaches us that consciousness has capabilities far beyond what mainstream science accepts, but it also warns that without proper preparation, ethical foundation, nervous system strength, and qualified guidance, these practices can destabilize rather than liberate. Perhaps the greatest revelation is this: the practices were hidden, not to keep power from humanity, but to protect humanity until it was ready. And according to many tradition keepers, that time is now. The sutras that were lost are beginning to surface, not in dusty manuscripts, but in laboratories, in documented experiences, in the merging of ancient wisdom and modern science. The question isn't whether these powers are real. Science is proving they are. The question is whether we're mature enough as a species to use them wisely. The journey continues, and for those who are ready, the hidden doors are finally beginning to open.